Are you feeling like it's really hard to keep up at school or uni, or you're legit like 20 lectures behind and getting super overwhelmed by the amount of assignments piling up, and you're here watching productivity videos but haven't actually gotten anything done? Yep, that's okay man, I got you. This is the exact productive study routine that got me through medical school. All you need is a good old notebook and your favorite pen. Now let's get started. Step number 1 is to learn how long everything actually takes. See, the most common reason why you're failing at following to your schedule isn't because you're lazy, but it's because you are unrealistic with your time. Before you try jumping in to do scheduling again, like literally stop and do this step instead, or else no matter how productive that routine is, you're never going to be able to follow it. It's actually really straightforward. Like, you don't have to be super rigid with yourself and use a timer and everything, but you just need to start paying attention to how much time you're allocating to yourself to do certain things and how long they actually take. So when you're doing your Anki flashcards, how long does it actually take? When you're super focused and take out all the unintentional scrolling, that's the real essence of it. Knowing this information is actually like the most important thing before you can start using a schedule. Honestly, trust me, like, find out what this time realistically is for you, because there's nothing worse than scheduling something and never finding time for it. The truth is, it creates more stress than not, right? Because you feel like you can't keep up with it and then you give up altogether. Does that sound familiar? Have you been in this situation before, and how did you get out of it? Step number 2 is to schedule your compulsories. Next, you're going to want to schedule in all your non-negotiables and the compulsory things that you have to do, which is pretty much everything for a uni student. So if you're in school, this means things like lectures, tutorials, labs, when assignments are done, all of that fun stuff. When I was a student, which is actually not that long ago, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I was still using a planner, a good old pen and paper, and it still works, guys. But I slowly transitioned to using Google Calendar during my clinical years. So being in a hospital, I needed to know where I was just from looking at my phone instead of having to dig around for my diary. So if you're the type of person who needs to know where you are without having to have your bag and your physical diary with you, then yeah, go ahead and use a Google Calendar. And I've got a video here just to outline how I use my Google Calendar to do scheduling if you're interested. Oh, by the way, the non-negotiables also include meal times, guys. The most important thing that you need to remember is to eat well. Don't be skipping meals because you need to study. Like, honestly, it's just not worth it. The brain is the organ that uses the most energy out of your whole body, so you're gonna want to feed it in order to study, right? Step number 3 is to fill in the gaps. So after you've filled in your lectures, your lectures, your labs, and your tutorials, you'll find that there are lots of gaps in your timetable. This is where you gotta be strategic, guys. I use these gaps as my study sessions, even if they're 1 hour long or 30 minutes long. I'm just going to show you a realistic example of what I did during my pre-med year. I had an average of 4 1-hour lectures every single weekday, and then amongst the week as well, I'd have 1 or 2 labs that are 3 hours long each week. So I'm going to show you how I fit in different study sessions. Typically, I'd have my lectures stacked back to back in the mornings. That is intentional and strategic as well, guys. I hope I don't get cancelled. In my university anyway, this isn't allowed. Like, you're not allowed to jump streams, but they don't really check that often, so I've done this, but yeah, don't cancel me. Since we've got a massive cohort in pre-medicine, like there's like thousands and thousands of people doing the same exact course, they've got lots of streams of lectures, like 3 or 4 lectures teaching the exact same thing for one lecture throughout the day. Most of my lectures were actually supposed to be in the afternoons, but I found out they are morning ones, so I started going to the morning ones so that I could stack them one after another. What that means is that I could get all my lectures over and done with first thing in the morning when my energy is at its peak, and then for the rest of the day I've got uninterrupted workflow. I can schedule my day a bit better, provided that I don't have labs in between that interrupts that. So see if you can do something similar. Like, if you can't, like, don't worry about it. Say if you have an hour gap between the first and the second lecture, I just use that gap to study for what we've just been taught, or I would use that wee hour to prepare for the next lecture. I know it's only like an hour and it's really tempting to just hang out with your friends and chill with them during that 1 hour break because everyone's taking the same course. But if you have 4 lectures a day and it's like 1 hour gaps in between those 4 lectures, that's 3 hours. If you add those 3 hours all together, literally save yourself 2 or 3 hours in the evenings. You gotta value your time. Step number 4 is how to actually study in these study gaps. I know this isn't technically a step, but this is one one question that I have been getting a lot on my Instagram through DMs. People are saying, oh, how do you study? Can you show us your productive routine while you do your studying? So I thought it would be helpful to share it here. This is going to be very brief because I still have quite a few steps to create a very productive study schedule for you guys. So this area here is going to keep quite short, but I do have a comprehensive video here about how I memorize everything in medical school. So during these short 1 hour gaps, what I like to do is that I try to force myself to dedicate only 1 hour after that lecture to study for the lecture that we've just been taught while it's fresh. And I do this on my note-taking system, which is OneNote for me. What I do is I summarize all the main points that I've learned from the lecture on my notes, and I actually have a video here. Is it here? Here. How I use OneNote to structure my whole medical school note-taking system, I guess. So check that out as well if you're interested. I sometimes also like to do mind maps. That really is a way to consolidate different things when you bring different ideas together, and that's otherwise called Hebbian theory. It just means that your neurotransmitters are more connected because you are connecting different ideas to one topic and you memorize it a bit better. I know a lot of people like to do excuse me, like to do Anki notes, which is like these flashcards online. If you don't already know, they are such a hype, and honestly I'm not a fan of it because I don't like to spend time creating questions, and I find it really like finicky, you know. I do agree with the flashcard system because that's great for active recall. Instead I'm lazy and I go onto the Anki bank. And because pre-med is such a big course, like everyone's doing it, so there are already existing Anki flashcards on there, so I literally just like download it and then I do my revision there. When you have longer periods of gaps, like in the evenings and the afternoons, that's when things get a bit more wild. Because without the structure of your compulsories like in the morning, you might think that you actually have a lot of time. When realistically, if you're in university or in high school, there is always something that you need to be working on. Like that next assignment that you need to work on, prepping for tomorrow's lectures, or studying for that mid-sem test that's coming up in 3 weeks' time. There's always things to do. So during these big blocks of time, what I do is that I look at the to-do list for today. Like what do I need to do? What's the most important and most urgent things that I need to be doing? I would always tackle the most difficult thing that I have to do the first thing that night, because after that I feel like a champion, because I've gotten the hardest thing out of the way already. If there's something more urgent than that, then get that done first. And then I'd use time blocking for each of those tasks, and this is where it's important to really know how long does it take for you to do a certain task. For example, this is my to-do list when I was in pre-med for one of the nights. So these are catching up on lectures, revising what's been taught, prepping for tomorrow's labs, complete the lab exit test that's due tomorrow, and then practice some mid-sem test papers. So the first one, catching up on the lecture, is, I think that would be urgent and it's not difficult. And then prepping for tomorrow's lab, it's urgent and also not difficult. And then the lab exit test is due tomorrow, so there's the urgency, so it's an urgent task and it's difficult because it's a test. And then practicing for the mid-sem test, I think, is non-urgent and not difficult. So that's how I grade these to-do lists. So looking at those things, right, you are able to prioritize what you need to do that day. If you find that this video is helpful, make sure you let me know in the comments below. I would really be grateful to hear what you have to say. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button to see more content like this. Anyway, on to step number 5. That is to schedule in your wake and sleep time. This is really like super important, because if you don't schedule in your sleeping time, chances are you're just going to keep pushing your study schedule out later and later into like the 2 or 3 a.m. zone where you know nothing good ever happens and you won't remember anything that you've learned. And yeah, of course, like, you need sleep. In pre-med, I would wake up at 7 a.m. every day because the first lecture was at 8 o'clock and I had to get my breakfast in, so that's why I woke up at 7 o'clock. And then I would go to sleep at midnight, so that would be my day for me. And rinse and repeat. Step number 6, we're nearly there, guys. Set up a recharge time and reward yourself. I can't emphasize how important it is to have downtimes to look after yourself. We are not robots. Like, we can't work when our battery levels are at 0%. Look, I'm not going to be nagging here, but you get to choose how you want to spend your time resting. I know a lot of my friends like to play games or be on social media in order to rest. You know, if that's you, then you do you. I personally find that after being on social media, I'm actually more tired after it and I feel even more drained. Kind of want to be honest with yourselves. Do you feel recharged after doing those things? Just be sure that somewhere in there that you are doing something that actually rejuvenates you. For me, I know these things are hanging out with my friends, doing a bit of shopping, getting that exercise in, getting the endorphin hits. The great thing about having these leisure activities is that you can schedule them into your calendar, which means that they become a motivation and a reward for you. When you see them in your calendar after a long day, you're like, ah shit, I get to hang out with my friends at 8 o'clock, so I better get shit done before I can do that, so then I can enjoy that activity guilt-free. Step number 7, which I think could be actually the most important step that dictates whether or not someone is successful with following their routine versus when they're not, and that is to really capitalize on your weekends and your public holidays. So what do I mean by that? I found that in the weekends it was like the best thing ever for a university student, because that means that you had full control of 2 whole days, which mean you had a lot of flexibility. For sure, you need to go enjoy your weekends, but make sure that you are using these downtimes to catch up for studies that you couldn't fit in during the week. So this means for me on the weekends and public holidays, I'd actually wake up around the same time as I would on a weekday, because I know that I function the best in the morning. I would usually spend all of Saturday doing studying, catching up on things that I couldn't do during the week because something came up, and then have little breaks in between. Then on Sunday, it is a bit of more of a chill day, so I'd spend half of the day studying, half of the day doing leisure activities, going to church, hanging out with friends. Sundays are typically a bit more chill. Even with the study sessions, I am typically doing things like tying up loose ends and preparing for the next week so that I can get myself in the best mindset I can when Monday comes. Okay, this is step number 8, and that is to be flexible and strict with your boundaries. Look, I know this sounds a bit contradictory, but it works. What I mean is that you want to have a rigid enough framework so that you can always come back to it when something doesn't go as planned. Because let's face it, like if you're a uni student, there are always things that are going to pop up that you really want to attend, like a really cool flat party that you have to go because everyone's going, like go. But make sure you know that you are consciously sacrificing your study time for this event. So it has to be rescheduled later on during the week. So that's having a rigid structure, and also having flexibility means that you are allowed to go do uni things. Go and enjoy your uni life. So I'm not saying that you can't do those things. You can, just need to be responsible. My boundaries with myself is that I would rather go to these random pop-up events than to be unintentionally scrolling on my phone on social media, because that's wasting time for me. Back in the days, I would literally leave my phone in my room for 16 hours straight. Like first thing in the morning, I check it, that's it. And then the second time, I check it before I sleep. And I leave it in the room so there's no distractions. Like I literally have no better way of doing it. Let me know how you guys deal with your procrastinations and how you keep yourself focused instead of getting distracted by social media. Like let me know in the comments below. I'd be so interested to hear what you guys do. Hey, if you found this useful, you'd want to check out this next video on how to stay consistent to stop burning out.